part of the COF. Oh, thanks, Jasmine. I'm part of the COF staff. I am in charge of the fellowship and scholarship programs, and in addition to running the retirement seminar. So this is the second iteration of the virtual session. We'd had one last Tuesday. We have one today, and then for the next two Tuesdays. We will be doing an in-person retirement seminar at the annual symposium in Cleveland on May 18th. So that's the Monday. And on the website, when you sign up for the symposium, you can enroll in the retirement seminar. So if you want to hear this today and then come back in May and hear a lot of the same information, that's probably to your benefit. It is always helpful to do this, the seminar at least a couple times because there's a lot of information, a lot of important information, and we really want to make sure that everyone goes either separates or retires with all the knowledge that they need to be successful in the next chapter. So today we have two presentations. Just so everyone knows that all these have been loaded onto the COA's events page. The slides have. So we did last week's and we have the ones for today are on there. So you can access those and we'll be doing that for the next 2 weeks also. We have asked that everybody please mute your microphones and turn off your audio, your videos, just so it's not a distraction for the presenters. We will enable the chat box toward the end of the presentation. So if anything that was discussed you didn't get an answer to, you'll be able to pose your questions in the chat box at the end. And Jasmine and I will be looking at those. If we have time, the presenters can answer those questions. If we don't, we'll get those all together, give them to the presenter to give answers to, and then we'll post those answers to those questions on the COA page also. So we'll get started today. We have two presentations. The first one is Navy Mutual about survivor benefits plans, and then the one at noon will be the VA disability claims process. So we'll kick off today with retired Commander Dave Babcock. He served 23 years as a Navy pilot after graduating from Annapolis, and then served 25 years as a civilian in the Department of Navy. He has been with Navy Mutual since 2021, and he is part of their Education and Veterans Service Department, serving as a military affairs liaison. He's currently located in Pensacola, Florida, and he's on the line now and ready to go. So thanks, Dave. Go ahead and when you're ready.
All right. Thank you, Annette. Thank you, Jasmine. Thank you, everybody, for having Navy Mutual here to talk about this subject. As Annette mentioned, Dave Babcock, Navy Commander retired, and I've been doing this presentation for a number of years, and I feel it's extremely worthwhile for future retirees and to the extent that spouses can listen in as well, because it's a subject that we don't readily address, perhaps, but it's something that is necessary, and it's about survivor benefits. What happens with respect to your military survivor benefits, your service benefits at retirement, and then specifically, we're going to do the proverbial deep dive, if you will, into survivor benefit plan. And it's enough to be dangerous, so to speak, because the plan can be very convoluted depending on circumstances and nuances with the individual situations, but we'll give you a broad overview, SBP 101. But to the extent that you know that Navy Mutual is a nonprofit veteran services organization resource, we are subject matter experts on the subject of survivor benefit plan. So you may have some questions leaving this, and I think Jasmine and Annette will capture some of those perhaps in the chat. But you also know that Navy Mutual, you see the email address and the website there, that we are a constant resource for you at no cost, no hooks, no products, that kind of thing, that we are there to support your needs and answer your questions with regard to survivor benefit plan and survivorship in general. So Navy Mutual, as I briefly mentioned, it is a nonprofit VSO. There's kind of two sides to it. On the one hand, we've been around for 150 years, and we sell life insurance. As a nonprofit, we can offer it at very low cost. We sell to all the services, Public Health Service included, NOAA, other organizations, Coast Guard. But I'm not with the sales team, and that is the ticket that I have to be able to talk to DoD audiences on base, off base, and stuff like that, because I'm with the education team, and we focus on bullet 2 and 3. We help educate members, active duty vets, and their families on matters of financial security, so we can do spend plan, budget plans, that kind of thing. But we also help them secure the survivor benefits they have earned through their service. So we won't necessarily do the heavy lifting for a family, but we can steer them in the right direction, help them get survivor benefits they may have through the VA, through their public health service or DoD service, through survivor benefit plans. So we're just a good resource, and just something that you might want to keep on a sticky note, something in your lockbox or whatever the case may be, that if it is regards to survivorship, we're there to assist families and members. The disclaimer here is that we're not endorsing anything on behalf of DoD, although all the things we're talking about today are either a DoD service benefit entitlement or VA Social Security, that kind of stuff. So it's nothing on the private sector, but we're not endorsing anything, any ideas or comments on behalf of DoD or Department Homeland Security for the Coast Guard and Public Health Service. So it's really just public domain information, and we give you the access and the steers to go search out for more information if you want to. Retirement, as daunting as it may be, as welcoming as it may be, does face its challenges, and maybe looking for that next job is priority number one, but you ought to take a little bit of time to kind of take a step back and assess where I am with regard to survivorship. It's just a milestone and a good opportunity to do that. There's a forcing function involved here because your survivor benefits are changing whether you do anything or not, because your benefits will change. So that's a good opportunity to kind of reassess the balance sheet there to say, hey, in this next chapter, how is my survivorship planning? And we have tools to do that, to assist you. We have our website there is in the lower right-hand corner. It's on the QR code. And as Annette said, you'll have this presentation so you can secure those later on. But we have some of the tools that will help you set up perhaps like a notebook or a lockbox or a hard copy, soft copy file that says, hey, in case something happens to me, Dave, break the glass, open the binder, go through the checklist. And so we have planning checklists about what important documents to gather together, survivors checklist. What's something that your family might use as a checklist going through and notifying the government, the VA, what the processes are? Because remember, you probably have the corporate information as a member that your family may or may not. So you want to tee them up for success, especially in case something happens to you early on, heaven forbid, or as time goes to the right and your family grows. We have a personal log, which is really just a PDF file where you can capture important information like your savings or your investment accounts, your insurance policies, policy numbers, things like that. Again, a roadmap, teeing them up for success. Don't make the burden excessive. Give them the tools to succeed after you're gone so they can optimize the benefits that either you have left behind or some of the other protections you've given to the family. And then other important information there is relatively obvious. The VA paperwork, I'll focus on that for a second, is because you may have a VA disability. Hopefully not to the extent that it could be critical for your health and take you away. But if it does, maybe there would be some VA money for your family set aside as a survivorship claim due to your passing. Well, that's not the kind of paperwork you're going to play I've got a secret with. So make sure your family knows where that is so they can access it. If you were exposed to something like Agent Orange, using a Vietnam era example, or the burn pits in the Gulf War, that kind of thing, or exposure to some toxins, maybe that is a critical thing that you have annotated with the VA. You have maybe a disability claim, and if it takes you away, your family could get some money for that. Your SBP election decision, which we'll talk about today. Again, if you and the spouse both die, let's say in the car accident, and your executor or your trustees going through your estate, they would find some of this paperwork that says, hey, there might be some money from the government under this survivor benefit plan for your children. Well, maybe that wouldn't be uncovered unless you have that stuff collated in one place. So I think you get the gist here is that while you're charging off, getting a new career, wonderful, great, taking the pack off from a military service, don't forget to kind of huddle around and say, hey, my survivorship is changing. What are we going to do about it? And that's what we're going to walk through today. The benefits you currently have very quickly, just to put it in context, how they're going to change, and then some options you have going forward. So these are just some examples of, whoops, I just have to minimize something here. Sorry. I'm sorry. I hit a button and I can't get back to my screen. There we go. Uh, what monthly benefits you have right now if there was a death on active duty. Okay. So these are just two examples, a snapshot, E9, and I know the audience here is fairly senior, '06, let's say, 24 years of service, a spouse and one child. If you died on active duty, your spouse immediately would be get some tax-free money from the VA. In fact, the first three lines are tax-free money from the VA with a death on active duty. The first one is for the spouse, dependency indemnity compensation, or DIC for short, $16.99 a month, and this is 2026 numbers. If you had children under the age of 18, your spouse would get an additional $359 for 2 years. And then each child under the age of 18, 19 in high school, if they're still in high school, will get $421. So not a huge amount of money, but it's decent. It's COLA adjusted each year, and it's tax-free, and it's a monthly stipend that would go to the surviving spouse, provided he or she hasn't remarried before the age of 55. And the children age out at the age of 18 or 19 if they're still in high school. For the VA money to go to the surviving family, the death would have to be service connected, and by and large it would be, but that would mean an adjudication by the VA. The survivor benefit plan, the next line. Again, this is on active duty. And you may be thinking, well, wait a minute, that survivor benefit plan, that's that program that I have to decide when I retire to do it or not do it. And that's true. But while you're serving on active duty, you are covered under the survivor benefit plan at no cost. It's an entitlement. And what they do if you die in active duty, they take 75% of your base pay. So have that number. Your spouse, family gets 55% of that number. So 75% of base pay, family gets 55%. And that's why you see the delta between the E9 and the '06, because base pay is time in service and rank or rate dependent. So that's why the E9 is at 6,000, the '06 at 8,400. And I failed to mention that on the VA money, it's uniform for the E9 and '06. In fact, it's still the same for E1 as it is for an '08. It doesn't regard rank or rate or time in service, but the SBP does. And so that's why there's a delta between the two. That would be taxable income for the surviving family, and it would go to the family if the death was adjudicated as in the line of duty. So there would be a JAG investigation, and it would be reviewed perhaps by the first flag officer in your chain of command. But these are monthly benefits that would go to a surviving family, and it's decent. We always wish it could be more, but it's fairly decent, right? Let's go next slide. I am having a hard time advancing this because I hit that other. I beg your pardon. Okay, crisis averted. Not only that, you have also some lump sum death benefits entitled to you by virtue of your service. You are currently protected unless you opted out of the program or for something less, $500,000 in a serviceman's group life insurance policy. You pay for that. You pay $5 for every $100,000 worth of coverage. The price actually just went down. So you're paying about $25 a month for that protection. Remember, you will get that protection for you unless you make a positive step to say, I don't want it or want something less. Likewise, for your spouse, if they're enrolled in DEERS and children enrolled in DEERS, they will automatically be protected. Your spouse is protected for $100,000. There's an additional cost for that that you pay for, but it's automatic. The defaulted position is you will pay for it unless you back down from it. And each child is protected at $10,000. So the family situation is 500 for the member, 100K for the spouse, 10K for kids, a protection you have while you're wearing a uniform, a lump sum benefit. Additionally, you have $100,000 death gratuity. That is a benefit. You don't pay for it. When I retired over 20 years ago, it was about 12 grand. Then they called it fallen heroes compensation for people forward in the AOR. And Congress, like appropriately so, legislated it for everybody, forward, rear, and in between at the AOR. So you're protected at $100,000. So my spouse, from a lump sum perspective, if I died on active duty today, would be protected by 600K tax-free money. There's also a Social Security lump sum death benefit of 255 whopping dollars. Kind of a ridiculous amount, I know. And it was established in 1935 to take care of the final remains of somebody back in the day. That number has not been brought forward into today's world, where it could easily be $10,000 to $15,000 to take care of the final remains of somebody. Other Social Security benefits have been COLA adjusted and adjusted over time, retirement, survivor benefits, things like that. But the lump sum Social Security benefit is still sitting at 255. TRICARE medical coverage with a death on active duty, lifetime for the spouse unless they remarry. Kids would get it as long as they're age eligible under DEERS. Housing allowance for 1 year, meaning BAH or base housing for a year, depending on availability. They'll move the final move for the family, and the funeral burial benefits would be covered by the service. Now, when you reach retirement, this is the aha moment here, where, if I can get it to move, oops, is your SGLI goes away, goes to zero. Your death gratuity goes to zero. The lump sum death benefit is still there. As a retiree, your spouse is protected in retirement under TRICARE protection options if they want to pay for it. And then TRICARE for life after the age of 65, kids, as long as they're DEERS eligible. But there's no more housing allowance. There's no more final move. The funeral burial benefits, it depends. You could get some money for the VA if there was a VA disability that took you away and you were in care of the VA and your family applied for it. So all this to say, I walk through some pretty healthy monthly benefits, VA and DOD, pretty healthy lump sum death benefits, fairly inexpensive, but all that changes when you retire. The monthly benefits are gone and the lump sum benefits are gone. So that's that dynamic shift in the picture that says maybe this is an opportunity to refocus my survivorship planning. And really, maybe it's something you've been doing all along as you married, had children, took on a mortgage. So I may not be telling you anything you didn't already know, but for some folks, they don't understand the full implications of this transition and the fact that these benefits are going away. With respect to SGLI, they do extend SGLI protection for 120 days after your retirement. So they throw the umbrella of protection out there for 120 days. You don't pay any additional money for it, but they throw that coverage out there for you, your spouse, and the kids. And principally, that's to allow you time to search for another life insurance program, commercial, VA, whatever the case may be, if that's part of your game plan. So you don't want to let go of some coverage before you secure another one. If that's your game plan, and that extension for 120 days allows you to do it. Unfortunately, the death gratuity does curtain fall right at your retirement. So setting that stage of how there's going to dynamic shift in your survivor benefit planning, it tees up the the picture of how do I mitigate the risk in case something happens to me in retirement, and what are some of the programs that can help uh, reestablish my survivorship planning with the vacuum created by some of the things given by the military. So there are you and your spouse in the left-hand bucket there living the high life. Perhaps you have a civilian job in retirement. Your spouse may have a employment. Your investments are still humming, doing well. Your TSP account is still growing. Even though your retired pay isn't going into it, you can still move things around. Maybe you have a 401k with your new employer. Maybe you've done your individual IRAs. All those kinds of things are still humming along as a retiree. You're getting your retired pay, which is a good annuity. Not often exists in today's world, but you are entitled to get that because of your service. And maybe even you have some tax-free VA disability money coming into the family by virtue of your disability rating. Okay. So there you are clicking along. Something happens to you, the retiree in retirement. What happens to your retired pay when you pass in retirement? It goes to zero midnight the day you die in retirement. So that next month is that proverbial what now ranger for the family. And that's the pre-planning that goes into the survivorship to tee up that potential, that risk mitigation in case something does happen to you. So there's a surviving spouse after your passing in retirement. Maybe your retired pay did go to zero, and it would be unless you had the survivor benefit plan that I'll talk about. But the surviving spouse still has their job. The investments that you have with your spouse is still humming there. And the things that might help reconstitute that bucket from a very macro sense could include maybe VA survivor benefits for the surviving spouse because that VA disability took you to the grave in retirement. Well, that's a claims process with the VA, not guaranteed, but they could file that claim. Life insurance, obviously, very commonly a big ticket item, term insurance, perhaps whole life, but something to replace income in those income producing years with the loss of one or of the spouses, one of the income producers. Other assets you might have, rental properties, precious metals, other day trading, other investments outside of tax shelters like IRAs and 401ks, but maybe you have some other assets that come into play. And Social Security certainly can be a contributor to your surviving spouse's income, but more than likely later years when they can leverage either your Social Security retirement pay or their own based on their career, based on their primary insurance amount that they may get from Social Security by virtue of their own work history. And that leaves us with the blue orb. SBP, Survivor Benefit Plan. First, let me say it's a good problem to have. And it's embedded as an entitlement because of your service. There's no medical check, so you are entitled 100% to get SBP. It's entirely up to you and your spouse whether you want to do it or not. But what SBP can help refill that surviving spouse income, that bucket, if you will. And it all depends on when you die because those things like investments and life insurance, they might have a time component or a benefit component depending on if you're eligible and things like that. So the great unknown is we don't know where you're going to die. You come across a survivorship plan that sits well with you and your spouse from a risk mitigation perspective, but SBP can be one component. And what SBP does is it's a federally subsidized program and it enables some of your retired pay to continue to your spouse and perhaps children in the event of your death and retirement. Remember, without SBP, retired pay goes to zero. Other things come into play, but one of them could be the Survivor Benefit Plan program that enables some of your retired pay to continue past your death and retirement and not drive to zero. So we'll talk about the cost and benefit basics. There's a monthly premium that you pay in retirement to have SBP. And if something happens to you, there's a monthly survivor benefits that goes out to the person that is your beneficiary. The elected amount is the key word here. It's in bold. And when you say you want SBP, the next question might be, what's your elected amount? And it's strange because it's a dollar amount that you pick between you and your spouse. It's a dollar amount that you pick that drives how much you pay and what the benefit is in case you pass. Elected amount can range from a minimum of $300 up to your maximum gross monthly pay from the service each month. What's the top line on your retiree LES before taxes, before any other withholdings, things like that? What's DOD giving you, if you will, okay, each month? So it could be, let's say my max gross monthly pay in retirement was $1,000. Yours is going to be much more than that. It's just an example and it keeps it kind of clean. But for $1,000 of my maximum elected amount, I would be paying 6.5% of that elected amount each month for the benefit of having the Survivor Benefit Plan program in effect. 6.5% of 1,000 is $65. I'm paying that each month. But because it's a government program, they allow me to pay that with non-taxable income. So I'm getting a greater buying power of using that money for SBP than I would buying groceries. Because if I'm buying groceries, I'm using taxable income. Buying SBP, I'm using non-taxable income. And where you obviously see that manifested is in your taxable income from retired pay subject to federal income tax that year. If I get $50,000 a year in retirement pay subject to federal income tax, I pay $4,000 a year for SBP. I'm only paying federal income tax on $46,000 a year. So it's taken off the top every year that you have SBP. So there's a tax advantage on the front end, and it's extracted immediately each month from your retired pay by the government. Now there I am humming along, giving SBP, paying for SBP, paying for SBP. Something happens to me. My premiums stop. Now it's payout time to my surviving spouse, let's say. They get 55% of that elected amount. My elected amount was 1,000, so my surviving spouse will get $550. Remember, it's not the whole elected amount they get. Elected amount is a factor, a number that drives premium and benefit. 55% of the elected amount goes to my surviving spouse. 55% of 1,000 I mentioned is 550. It goes to my surviving spouse every month as long as they live, COLA adjusted, and it's subject to federal income tax. Let's focus on the COLA protection there for a minute. When you're alive in retirement, you get a COLA increase every year because of the government giving you a COLA adjustment. Hopefully, on average, it's been about 2.5%, 2.6% over the last 20, 30 years. Okay. Some years it was zero. 2009 and 10, it was zero. Other years it might be north of 12, 13%. So it's kind of sinusoidal, but it averages out about 2.5%. So as your pay increases, and if you die, your surviving spouse gets the portion of retired pay. And that also would be subject to yearly COLA inclusion or adjustments because it's the same retired pay that you would have gotten, only a portion of it's going to your spouse, so the COLA applies to them as well. So there's COLA protections that's synonymous with what you get in retired pay would be transferred to your surviving spouse's elected amount. Now, a word about the elected amount. You can't adjust the elected amount going forward. Okay. So if my $1,000 was what I picked as elected amount, you can't adjust that in retirement and increase it or decrease it. But what the government does to keep pace with inflation is every time you get a pay raise, a COLA adjustment, 2026, it was 2.8%. They adjust your elected amount by the same percentage, 2.8%. So you get a pay raise, the same percentage increase of COLA adjustment to your pay gets applied to the value of your elected amount. So your elected amount is going up the same percentage as your pay. It's going up in parallel. So that if you pass away 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, your spouse is leveraging an elected amount that has been COLA adjusted for the 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years since your retirement. And it's 55% of that number that they get each month and still gets COLA adjusted in their survivorship, as opposed to the kickoff value of $1,000, for example. Okay. So it's not static. You can't change it, but it's tied to the COLA of your pay each year that you get as a COLA adjustment. And again, in 2026, it was 2.8%. Okay. Who can you give SBP to? And this is the nuances of SBP start to come into play. You can only have one beneficiary at a time. And this is a cutaway from the DD Form 2656, which you'll fill out as part of your retirement package, where you indicate what you want to do with SBP. It's a portion of that form. In block 36 of that form, you can elect A. I want it to go to my spouse. B, I wanted to go my spouse and kids. My kids would be a secondary beneficiary if the spouse wasn't available to receive it. And we'll talk more about the ages and things like that in a moment. Or I just want to protect my children only. I want to bypass the spouse and just protect the kids. All right. Or item D, an insurable interest only available to somebody who's not married at retirement or a single parent of one child. That opens the avenue for you to give it to somebody closer than a cousin as a beneficiary. Mom, dad, sister, brother, aunt, uncle, or that single child. Okay. But the cost for that insurable interest could be between 10 and 40% of your retired pay. Very, very significant cost and something you really want to investigate before you pursue. Item E and F go back to the survivor is your former spouse or the former spouse and the children of that marriage. And that is more than likely because of a divorce decree that's on file with the Pay Center, and Defense Finance and Accounting Services, one that manages the SBP program for all the services. That is a divorce decree that's on file with them that mandates what the member will do with SBP upon retirement. And even though they may be married to a current spouse, it may have to be directed to a former spouse or a former spouse of the kids of that marriage. Okay. So if you have a divorce decree, you want to make sure you're well versed, maybe seek counselor's support or attorney support in seeing what it really says with regard to the survivor benefit plan program. Not half retired pay, but specifically the survivor benefit plan. Okay. Now, item G is something I want to hover over for a little bit. I don't want to play an SBP, which is a perfectly fine decision. And I should have said in the very beginning, SBP, some people want to embrace it, people want to kick it to the curb. Okay, they're both right. It all depends on what is good for you and your family in your survivorship situation and planning. So there's no right or wrong answer. So the election to not participate in SBP is completely valid if that's the decision you land on. But here's the ramification of that. If you have a spouse at the time of retirement or age eligible children at the time of retirement, which is under 18 or 22 if in college, okay, full time, or a special needs child that can't care for themselves into adulthood, and none of them could be married. Okay, none of those situations could be married. So if you have eligible kids or a spouse at the time of retirement and you say no thank you to SBP, you're you're turning away from the program not only for them but any future spouses or future age eligible children that come into your environment, so to speak. So you're closing the watertight door on the people that exist at the time of retirement or any future people that fill that billet, spouse, future spouse, age eligible kids, any future age eligible kids. Okay. However, if you have nobody filling those billets, one or the other or both, at the time of retirement, you're not forfeiting anything by saying no. If you have a spouse and you say no, that zeroes out the spouse potential and future spouse potential. But because you have no age eligible kids, you have that as a potential to enact SBP protection if they do come into your lives after retirement. And you may not be thinking about growing a family at that point, but let's an age eligible grandchild comes into your life as the
Hey, Dave, you lost your audio. Uh, Apologies for the interruption, everyone. See if we can get Dave back on the line here in just a minute.
I'm back, Annette. Do you have me?
Yeah, we got you now. Thank
Oh,
you.
okay, you're welcome. I don't know what happened there. Let me go back to this slide here. Did I go through the item G for everybody about not having people to participate?
Yes,
Okay, all right. Am I ready to go on to the next slide then?
yes.
Okay, thanks. All right, let's talk a little bit about spouse or former spouse only coverage. It's a lifetime benefit for your surviving spouse. Okay, they're going to get that portion of your military retirement pay, 55% of whatever the elected amount is at the time of your death, right? Because it's COLA adjusted from the time of your retirement going forward. And they'll get that money COLA adjusted year after year after year, month after month after month. The only corollary to that is if they decide to remarry before the age of 55, SBP will be suspended, meaning they still have the eligibility, but they're not getting the pay because they married before the age of 55, remarried. But if that marriage ends in death or divorce, they can reapply for the benefit. So the pillow talk ought to be something like, we're getting SBP, you understand, you'll get a portion of retired pay. In case me, the member, passes, the spouse will get it. But realize, of course, if you do decide to remarry before 55, that money will be suspended. However, if you defer your marriage till after 55, that money will keep coming to you uninterrupted. Okay? But here's the more important aspect of spouse concurrence. If you don't elect the maximum elected amount, your full monthly gross retired pay, or you just want to protect the children only, okay, up to 18, 22 if in college full time, special needs child, remember they're not married. You just want to go kids only. Your spouse has to agree to that. Or if you have a spouse and you don't want to get SBP, your spouse has to agree to that. And that requires a notarized signature on the DD Form 2656. It's a public law. It's the same for any other commercial annuity program somebody may get in retirement. So it's not a DOD thing. It's basically a Spouse Protection Act kind of thing that says they're acknowledging the fact that they're not going to be the maximum benefactor or a partial benefactor of the SBP program. The default option is if, let's say, the member doesn't want to get it and the spouse says, heck yeah, we are getting it. They're just coming from two different perspectives. All right. The default option for that paperwork going forward without the spouse signature, I'm assuming the spouse wouldn't agree to the negative decision, so they don't sign off on it. It goes forward to the DoD Pay Center. The DoD DFAS will pay, the member will pay for that protection for the spouse and any age eligible kids until that paperwork gets resolved. All right. So the member will pay the default option. They will pay for it. It'll side with the spouse's decision in that example until they iron out their differences. The children only coverage, again, it's a biological, a stepchild under the age of 18, 22 if enrolled college full time. That 6.5% freight that we talked about, 6.5% of the elected amount, that's spouse protection. Children are evaluated independently. Okay. So if you just are doing child only coverage, they look at the age of the member and the age of the youngest child being protected, and they come up with a cost calculation for what the benefit will be. And that website down at the the lower portion of the slide, actuarydefense.gov, has a good cost calculator for what SPP would be. But by and large, it's probably going to be less than $25 a month. Okay. If you have an incapacitated child, okay, incapable of self-support, it's a lifetime benefit, meaning they will never age out. Okay. And it could be placed in a special needs trust. Okay. So remember, children only coverage based on the member's age, the age of the youngest child. If it goes to the kids, they'll share in the 55% for whoever is eligible, maybe the 10, 12, 14-year-old. And they'll keep getting that benefit until their share ages out when they turn 18 or 22 if in college full time. Then maybe it's split two ways. The second child ages out. And now whoever was the youngest child at the beginning now is the oldest one receiving the final check until they're 22 if in college full time, or 18 if they're not going to college. They get the final payment of 55% of the elected amount, and then SPP is over. However, as it will, it's more involved, but there is a process, but conceivably that special needs child will not age out. Spouse and kids, that's the premium package, if you will. The spouse is the primary beneficiary. The children are the secondary, meaning if you both die in the car accident, it could flow to the kids. But it's not going to flow to the kids unless you do the child, spouse, and child benefit. Spouse is primary, 6.5% of the elected amount. And now the add-on for the kids is usually less than $1 or $2 a month because the risk to the government is very low. Meaning, what's the likelihood that you're going to pass, spouse is not going to be available, and then it flows to the kids, and all that occurring before they reach 18 full time, very low. So the protection for the kids at that point is very low cost. Okay. So it's a premium cost for the spouse plus a rider, if you will, to take care of the youngest child and any eligible children going forward. Okay. These are just some examples of different elected amounts that may be more within your ballpark in terms of your gross monthly retired pay. Member and spouse who are 46 at the time of election. Okay, you may be older, whatever, but these are just representative numbers given these ages and these amounts. The first line, gray line there, is the 6.5% of the spouse costs with those elected amounts at kickoff. What's kickoff? The first year of retirement. It's going to be 4, 6, and 8K, right? That's the elected amount. Because next year, what's going to happen? They're going to be COLA adjusted because your retired pay is going to go up. So they're going to tweak the values of the elected amount by the same percentage that your pay went up. So those numbers are transiting upward, okay? Meaning the cost will go up each year by incrementally 2.5%, whatever the case may be. But the cost is increasing, but the benefit is also increasing. So at kickoff, spouse plus an 8-year-old, you can see the cost is 60 cents, 90 cents, $1.20 for if you had spouse and children with the youngest is the 8-year-old. So incrementally, the cost is very low in addition to the spouse cost. So if you're doing spouse costs and you have age eligible children, take serious consideration of adding the children benefit because it's very low cost. And it protects them for a limited time, but it also gives you the potential to protect any future children that may come into your lives, including grandchildren if they become your dependents. Spouse plus a 16-year-old, 12, 18 cents, 24 cents. You see the added on there. Very low cost. Now let's do child only. The 6.5% for the spouse rate isn't there because the spouse isn't protected. Remember, they have to agree to that coverage plan because they're not included, but it does dynamically change the cost for just children only because the risk to the government's a little bit more. It's more direct. Member passes, goes to the kids, doesn't have to flow through the spouse. So there's higher risk to the government, but not too much. And you can see that the cost per month can be very low. And once the children do age out, you recover all that pay. You get a little bit of a pay raise. Okay. All right. The last line there is the 55% at kickoff of 4, 6, and 8K. So that's what the surviving spouse would get as a follow-on to the member's death. But remember, that's COLA adjusted. And remember, those elected amounts aren't static. They go up every year. Okay. And after the death of the member, the beneficiary amount that the spouse gets is still subject to that COLA increase as time goes to the right. Okay. This is where you fill in on the DD Form 2656 what your elected amount is. Item 37. You don't have to tell them what your full gross pay is. They'll figure it out for you. Item A, 37A. Base my SPP on the elected amount of my full gross pay. However, if you do want a reduced amount, you go to 37B and fill in the blank of what you want your elected amount to be. Because remember, that's not the amount that your spouse will get. It's the driving factor that determines how much the cost is, 6.5%, and what the 55% value is at start for your surviving spouse. Okay. The base amount or elected amount. Okay. You have to make this decision by midnight the day you retire. Okay. So that's another kind of the vectors are all kind of coming together at your retirement date. And that's why, as Annette said earlier, it's a good idea to kind of chew on this stuff over time to get a good, better understanding of SPP and what the benefits are, or the negative side of it with respect to your family situation. How long do you pay premiums? You pay premiums for 30 years, and then you reach a paid in full status. You don't pay another premium. Your spouse is still protected the full benefit of the program, but you've paid enough into the program. So 30 years, the only other requirement is you have to at least attain the age of 70. So if you retire at 46, 50, it's going to be 76 or 80, for example, 30 years down the range. You never pay for a beneficiary that doesn't exist. If you're paying for a spouse and they don't exist anymore, perhaps they predecease you, or now they become your divorce spouse because you paid for spouse protection, means you don't have to pay for it any longer, unless the court says you have to follow on with a divorce spouse annuity. But if your spouse does predecease you, you don't pay for the premium any longer. Okay. You also don't get the money back that you paid into the program, right? Because you went into this with the kind of the going in position is I'm protecting my spouse in case I, the member, lose my life. And my concern is the continuation of retired pay. If that's not kind of a going in position, then maybe you're backing away from the SPP program because it's fundamentally around the need or desire to have continuation of retired pay. If the spouse does die first, not your fault, therefore the government's fault. The only silver lining to that is perhaps that you don't pay for it any longer. But if you do marry a new spouse, you can protect them under SPP. As long as you notify DFAS within 1 year of that marriage, you start repaying the premium and the protection starts at the 1 year anniversary of that marriage. And if you paid 20 years with spouse one, you only pay 10 years with spouse two because it doesn't restart that 30-year clock. There's only one off ramp. After you get into SPP at retirement, there's only one off ramp to get out of the program. And that's between the second and third year of retirement. Okay. It's a long and wide exit ramp, but if you miss the 3-year exit sign, you're in SPP for the rest of your retired life as long as you're paying for the beneficiaries that you elect. Okay. If you do opt out, you don't get a refund. You're just out of the program and there's no re-entry back into the program. All right. So The scenario could be like if I have a spouse and kids at retirement and I say no to SBP, remember I'm closing the watertight door on them or any future children. May be a valid decision. On the other hand, if you do a best guess of what you think you might need SBP for, the dust will settle after retirement. You get your job. The spouse is maybe getting a new job because of a geographic change. Kind of things kind of settle down over time. And you can reevaluate SBP between the second and third year. It gives you that reflection option to get out or stay in. But once you go past the 3 year mark, you're in. Whereas the no, if you have a spouse and kids at retirement, is a hard no. So one is more flexible, let's say, than the other. Okay. If the retiree passes away, the premiums are no longer paid any longer. Now it's benefit time to the surviving spouse. And again, they get that for as long as they live and COLA adjusted. Will the benefits ever exceed the cost? This is kind of a break-even analysis here. All right. So let's say I'm the guy in the red font. I paid in for 30 years into this program. All right. If I assume about a 2.5% COLA a year for those 30 years, what does that mean? My pay went up on average 2.5% a year for 30 years. And likewise, my elected amount was adjusted about 2.5% a year for 30 years. So when I pass, my surviving spouse at the 30-year mark is leveraging 55% of an elected amount that was COLA adjusted for 2.5% a year for 30 years. They're walking away with a substantial 55% of a substantially large number than what it was on the day I retired. Okay. To the extent that the break-even point, meaning my spouse would only have to outlive me by 2 years and 5 months. And the cumulative amount of money they get in those 2 years and 5 months will match everything I paid in for 30 years, the break-even point. All right. And oh, by the way, beyond that 2 years and 5 months, everything the spouse gets beyond that is gravy, as they say. It's beyond the cost of what I paid into it. You work your way back up the chart. If you die 15 years after retirement, assuming a 2.5% COLA for those 15 years, my spouse only has to outlive me by 18 months. They'll collect everything in cumulative of what I paid in for 15 years. And it keeps on ticking for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. All right. The lower part of the chart is gender neutral. Top part is not gender specific, but the lower part is, and it really just says that men of like age married to women of like age don't live as long. In fact, 75% of them will have a spouse that outlives them by 4 years, 50%, 9 years, 25%, 16 years. This is just really kind of an actuarial overview of the fact that men don't live as long as women, and the fact that from the COLA perspective, the break-even point is fairly clean, fairly short. What's the value of my benefit? Let's say in 2026, I did an elected amount of $8,000. My monthly premium is $520. My 6.5% is $520. Now that's its start. Over those 20 years, let's say that my COLA adjusted is averaging 2.5% a year. And I say 2.5% a year because that's the number we use, because looking back historically over the last 20 years has been about 2.6%. Over the last 30 years, about 2.7%. But over time, what that says is after 20 years, and I'm 66 now, I started at 46, we're looking forward at 2046, the annual cost of the program that I'm putting in each year for SBP is $7,900. That's a tax break each year, okay? The cumulative cost in those 20 years has been $123,000 for the program. And I'm looking on the top line. But the annual benefit for my spouse at my death is $75,000 a year. And when we're both 66, the likelihood of my wife who survives to the age of 62 is another 28 years. So they're into their 80s. So the value of that benefit for that surviving spouse could be about $1.5 million. This is just a drill to try to actuate the value of the SBP benefit in different scenarios. And if you go to the actuarydefense.gov website, you can plug in numbers that work well for yourself. Okay. But that's just showing you that At that point, if you look at your death at 66 in the top line there, you paid in $123,000, $800, 123K for those 20 years. The first year after your death, your spouse gets 75K. Then next year, it's a 75K plus COLA. You can see that it only takes about 2 years for them to recover everything you paid in. This is an actual slide based on the COLA over time since 2001. Let's say in 2001, I did a base amount, I'm looking at the chart in the right-hand side of $4,000. I paid $260. In 2026, that base amount, because of COLA over the years, and you can see that it fluctuated, but you have different amounts there. My base amount, my elected amount is now $7,400, meaning my spouse is leveraging now $4,100 in case I died at the 25-year mark since 2001. Okay. So that just shows you how COLA can impact the elected amount, but it also impacts the SBP beneficiary. Okay. That's looking backward. This is looking forward, averaging about 2.5% a year from 2026 to 2056, 30 years from now. If I did an elected amount of $4,000 in the right-hand box, my SBP benefit at kickoff is $2,200. In 30 years, assuming a 2.5% COLA, it's going to be $8,300. And my benefit to my surviving spouse, if I died at the 30-year mark, would be about $4,600 a month. Okay. So it just shows you that the growth of the elected amount, the growth in cost, but the growth in benefit as well. Do you still have me?
Yeah, we're still online,
Okay.
Dave. It's almost noon, and I know
Yep.
we started a few minutes late, and we
I'll wrap it up here
had some
real
IT
quick.
issues. But if you could finish up in the next 15 minutes, the
Oh,
next
yeah,
speaker's already
absolutely.
logged in,
Okay.
and then okay, thank you.
No worries. There's no right or wrong answer with SBP, like I talked about. It depends on life expectancy. If you, the member, remember, the closer I get to the SBP flagpole of doing it is, hey, I have a concern that I may predecease my spouse, but the other foot to fall says I have a need or desire for some of my retired pay to continue on to my surviving spouse. But if I'm married to somebody significantly older, that becomes less of a concern, perhaps because the likelihood of my spouse dying ahead of me might come into play, or if I'm married to somebody with a significant illness or condition. My survivor's income earning potential, my surviving spouse, yeah, they'll take the hit with the retired pay of me passing in retirement, but maybe they can recover quickly based on their own career or the values of our savings, investments, insurance. Yes, there's a value of the tax-free premiums over time. You have a fundamental need for continuation of partial retired pay. We talked about the value of the COLA protected benefits, and maybe even all things considered, maybe SBP is that fallback annuity that's always there in case a member dies, can help offset the long-term care costs for the surviving spouse. Okay. SBP and life insurance. Okay. The common refrain is I'll get a term policy instead, maybe $1 million, $1.5 million, $2 million, whatever the case may be. But just realize they are different vehicles. And the need for life insurance doesn't necessarily negate the need for SBP. They can coexist. You don't want to insure yourselves into the poorhouse, but by the same token, they respond to different needs. And you can see the differences there. The biggest one is that SBP is COLA protected over time, whereas life insurance is inflation degraded. The face value retains its face value, but the buying power of that money erodes over time by inflation. And maybe over 10, 20, 30 years, or maybe you've outlived your term policy, right? The value of that policy starts degrading. But by the same token, you can change the beneficiary of an SBP, whereas of life insurance, where SBP is a little bit more rigid. Okay. So different animals, just realize they cover different things and they have different perspectives. Okay. A monthly annuity versus a lump sum, taxable income versus non-tax lump sum for life insurance. Just different, they address different needs. Life insurance considerations, I'll say that approaching your retirement, and you want to get some life insurance, just realize as we get older, don't get any younger, that the cost can be considerable. based on illnesses or condition. Even if you could qualify, maybe it's cost prohibitive. One of the things that you do have a fallback on is the fact that you could, all things considered, seek life insurance support from the VA. All right. Now it's going to be costly, but it's guaranteed. What does that mean? Your STLI of 500K could be guaranteed with no medical exam. 120 days, you can get a commercial whole life policy through the VA. If you just Googled VA STLI conversion, you'll see these options. About a dozen companies out there that will guarantee you a policy. It won't be cheap, but it could be guaranteed. And that is especially important if you get thwarted on the commercial sector for life insurance because you have an illness or condition that precludes you from getting it. They may deny you. Okay. Remember SBP, no medical check. So you always have that to fall back on. All right. The other option a member has on the left-hand side is to get VGLI, and you can elect a VGLI benefit with no medical check as long as you pick it within 240 days. We'll talk more about VGLI in a moment. Likewise, on the right-hand side of that chart, your spouse, that $100,000 you have for FSGLI, remember 120 days after you retire, that evaporates. But in those 120 days, you could guarantee a commercial whole life policy for your spouse through the VA as well with no medical exam. Okay. Just an option in case you can't find a commercial vehicle to get there from here, because the VA is now offering you options in case you're not medically insurable, let's say. VGLI, don't just necessarily genuflect to VGLI because it is costly. You might want to do some commercial shopping on the outside sector to see where you stand. But knowing that you have VGLI as a fallback option within 240 days with no medical check could make it an attractive. And so it's very flexible on what it gives you. You don't have the traumatic injury protection, the disability protection that you have under SGLI on active duty, but has a lot of the same components as SGLI. The key feature, though, is you can get VGLI up to 500K like you had for SGLI. But the problem is it stair steps in cost up every 5 years automatically based on your age. And when you start to get north of about 50, it gets almost cost prohibitive, let's say, on a monthly basis for $500,000 of life insurance protection. So why would somebody enter into this program? Maybe because they have no other option because they're not medically insurable, but they need life insurance, okay? But realizing that it goes up every 5 years gives you cause to reflect on, I don't want to necessarily stay with this forever. I can reduce the amounts over time, or maybe do some good shopping while you're younger as you approach retirement to see if there's commercial life insurance options that beat the pants off VGLI, okay? Social Security benefits, I'll just say, get your Social Security statement, know where you stand with regard to survivor benefits. If you log on to ssa.gov, you get automatic statement from Social Security based on your current Social Security income status to date, based on your tax returns over the last 30 years, let's say. But it does have you survivor benefit section that does give you an idea of what your children may be eligible, what your spouse may be eligible. But remember, there's a means test for spouse, depends on how much money they make. And there's also a test based on what's the ages of the children that they're watching after your passing. TSP, very quickly, just remember, if you want to keep your TSP account active, which is a good idea, keep a minimum of $200 in it. One consideration might be, not do it, might be, put a couple, $200 or $300 in your G fund. That anchors your account while you move things in and out of your TSP in your retirement life, right? Maybe you roll a 401k downrange back into TSP. Why? Because the maintenance funds of TSP are so much lower than they are in the commercial sector. Or maybe you roll things out of TSP into a 401k. Whatever the case may be, you don't have that option unless you maintain at least $200 in your TSP account. So secure it, anchor it, make sure it's there if that's your decision so that it doesn't evaporate on you. Lots of things to consider today: the value of the SBP benefit, your income needs, Is retired pay stipend something that you want that family or the family needs to have going forward? Maybe special situations. Is your spouse somebody that from a cultural perspective wants to get that government check each month? Okay. Even though it's a lesser amount, it's still coming in with clockwork. Do you have a special needs child with that could be protected under SBP? Okay. We do a candid conversations the third Friday of every month. You'll have the slide deck from Annette, but there's a log on. We have a live virtual connection every month where you can dial in to learn to or listen to this presentation online active webinar where you can ask questions, but we'll go over a lot of these things again and perhaps in a little bit more depth. Okay. Third Friday of every month at noon Eastern. It's Adobe Connect log on there that you'll see. Okay. Finally, our website is the last one there listed. We have these presentation slides. We have a tutorial that fills out the DD Form 2656 step by step with you. Perhaps the question we get often asked most. We have those checklists we talk about, and we have reference to other websites that you see listed there. Finally, we are a resource for you. Email address, toll-free number, our website. Don't suffer in silence. Ask the questions, ask the hard questions with respect to your particular situation. Realize that we are also accredited VSOs with the VA. We can help you with your VA disability rating, your claims, your BDD. If you don't have a nonprofit standing in your corner to help you navigate with the VA, I'd highly recommend it. There are people out there that will take your money for that. Why do that when you have nonprofits like Navy Mutual or AMVETS or at the state and federal level that will assist you in navigating your course with the VA? Not because it's adversarial, but because it's very confusing and convoluted. All right. So there are a nonprofit that you can pony up with that helps you in your journey with the VA. And so with that, I'll say I'm finished, and I do apologize for some of the glitches on my end with respect to my Zoom. I'm sorry about that. But hopefully it's a fire hose. I know I do apologize, a lot of information, but hopefully you've got the genesis of what Survivor Benefit Plan involves, the COLA nuances with it, the different disability or different beneficiary things you have, and some of the particulars with those. So with that, and unfortunately, you got to make that decision before midnight, the day you retire, if you have spouses or dependent children to give it to. If not, you just have that in your back pocket to enact later on downrange. All right. That's all I have on that, unless there's any questions. And I guess you can feed me some questions if you have them, either via email or as the case may be.
Yeah, Dave, great presentation. I told the audience at the beginning, there's just so much information when
Yeah.
you're transitioning out of the service, and hopefully everyone can access the slides and kind of mull over some of this information, talk to your family. And if you have any questions, Dave has been gracious enough to give you some websites and some phone numbers to contact to get those answered. But in the consideration of the time, since we are over a little bit, what Jasmine and I will do is we won't open the chat right now. We'll go ahead into the next presentation. And at the end of that one, we will open the chat box. If you have anything you want to ask either of the presenters today, just put that in there. We will catalog those and get those to the presenters for answers, and then again, post those online. But again, just considering the time, and I know everyone's probably on their lunch break or something right now. So we'll go ahead and move into the next presentation. Thank you again, Dave. We
All
appreciate
right.
your time today.
All right. Thank you. I'll stop sharing and I'll get off so the other presenter can come in. All right.
Okay. Yes,
All
sir.
right.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
So our next presenter today is Eric Marquez. He's from the Albuquerque VA Regional Office. He's going to be talking to us about VA disability claims. He is a congressional liaison and outreach coordinator under the Benefits Administration at the VA. He has experience with claims processing, examination requests, and community outreach efforts focused on veterans benefits. This is a extremely important presentation. And again, we'll take questions at the end if you have anything that comes up that maybe wasn't covered in the presentations today. But Mr. Marquez, are you ready to go?
I sure am. Can I get a mic
Okay.
check? And then can you see the screen that I'm sharing?
We have both. Thumbs up for both of those. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for having us. And I do want to thank everybody for attending today. And I appreciate the support and everybody out here. I'm also going to introduce one of the individuals that's going to be assisting me today in our presentation. His name is Mr. Adam West. He is the outreach coordinator here in Albuquerque within the Veterans Health Administration side of things. And I am supporting the Veterans Benefits Administration. So if we can go ahead and get started. Mr. Adam, you ready?
Yes.
Here we go.
Good morning / afternoon, everybody. My name's Adam West. I'm the head of the outreach department here at the VA Medical Center in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And we're here to talk to you about the PACT Act and your benefits. So the PACT Act is a law that expands VA healthcare and benefits for veterans exposed to burn pits, Agent Orange, and other toxic substances. Now, this law was actually introduced and passed by Congress back in August of 2022. And there's a date down here that says March 5th, 2024, which is a very important date that you need to know about. Now, the law actually helps provide generation of veterans and their survivors with care and benefits that they've earned and deserved. Now, that date I was just telling you about, March 5th, 2024, before then, the PACT Act was designed to have veterans be tiered in, 3 tiers from that date, which was August of 2022 up until 2032. It was going to be a 10-year time span that all veterans would be able to participate in the PACT Act. Well, March 5th, 2024, Congress said we're going to do away with the tiers, and now all veterans are now eligible to apply for healthcare and also for benefits under the PACT Act. And you can see all this information at va.gov/PACT. Next slide, please. Now, the PACT Act is perhaps the largest healthcare and benefits expansion in VA history. It tells you right there below as far as where it came from a sergeant first class, which name is Heath Robinson, understanding the promises to address comprehensive toxics, which is PACT Act. Now, the changes that it brought in, it expanded and extended eligibility for VA healthcare for veterans with toxic exposure and also veterans of Vietnam, Gulf War, and post 9/11 eras. Now, it added more than 20 presumptive conditions and also presumptive exposure locations for Agent Orange, for burn pits, for other toxic exposures. Now, the VA requires also a toxic exposure screening for every veteran who's already enrolled in VA healthcare. And what that consists of is the RN will actually give you not a test, but it's a bunch of questions that they will ask you. I think it's around 10 questions that they will ask you concerning if you've been in areas that may have had toxic exposures to you while you were in the military. It also helps improve research, staff education, and treatment related to toxic exposures. Next slide, please. Now, the bottom line, all veterans exposed to toxins or hazards at home and abroad are now eligible to enroll in VA healthcare. A veteran does not need to be sick, nor do you need to file a claim with the VBA, which is what actually occurred before. But that is not the case anymore. So Vietnam all the way up through post 9/11 combat zones and also domestic locations are included in the PACT Act. Also, there's a list of toxins, which is extensive. Includes chemical, pesticides, lead, asbestos, certain paints, nuclear weapons, x-rays, and others. And you can find all that stuff in va.gov/PACT. Now, all the VA requires, and that's VA healthcare side and also the benefit side, is proof that you deployed in those locations. Could be orders or what have you. And Erica will give more information concerning that. And also a proof that you were in those garrison areas if you did not deploy that had those toxic exposures there. Next slide. Eric?
Okay, thank you very much, Adam. So what you guys are going to see here is it talks about some presumptive service connection, but some of this information here is the whole heart of applying for disability and how the VA looks at things, how the Veterans Benefits Administration looks at what you are claiming, what needs to be claimed, how it needs to be claimed, and I'm going to go over some of these first here. So one of the first things for disability compensation there has to be an event or an injury in service. Number two, there has to be a current diagnosis. And number three, there has to be a link, or sometimes referred to as a nexus. That's when a medical individual connects the lines between the two, whether if it's something that happened like an injury and a disability that you have now. It has to be a link between the two things there. So I'm going to give you guys some examples here and we'll kind of go from there. So an event or an injury in service. So let's say that during your time in service or during your time you experienced an injury like a fall and you injured your knee, and after you get out of service you still have some kind of diagnosis, or you were diagnosed in service of some kind of knee problem that it's still bothering you or still impacting you today. Those are those two biggest things for 1 and 2. And then number 3, you would go to a compensation and pension examination where a medical professional will provide a medical opinion. They're going to look at that injury that happened in service. They're going to determine based off of your medical service history and your current medical history now. And they're going to determine and make an opinion based off of whether that injury in service and your current condition now have some type of link. And to be able to be granted service connection when it comes to compensation, each one of these has to be met unless there is some type of presumptive service connection. So a presumptive service connection, and we'll touch on it here on this next slide, has to deal with an individual served in a specific location and has a current diagnosis. When an individual has served in one of these individual locations during these specific timeframes and after, the VA bypasses that need for a medical link for a individual to make that determination whether or not this condition was linked to service. Some of these locations here are those presumptive locations and are new to this PACT Act under the burn pit exposure. They are already determined that these locations have caused some of these presumptive conditions that I'm going to show you here in the next slide. Therefore, you would only need a diagnosis and proof of service that you were in these locations to be able to be deemed presumptive. So I'm going to go to this next slide here, and on here is some of the new presumptive locations under the Gulf War and the post 9/11 era. So you'll see a lot of these here are cancer related items and things like that, but there's also things like chronic bronchitis, rhinitis, sinusitis. Some of these things here can get diagnosed in service or after service, and if you deployed or if you served in any one of those time periods in the previous slide, it could potentially warrant you to a presumptive service connection, meaning again where you did not have to present that information in front of a medical professional to grant that service connection. So I'm going to jump forward here to this next slide, and this is just more so for these individuals that served on the time periods on the right, and this does have to deal with more so those individuals who were back during those eras here, that these new locations were added under the PACT Act that weren't previously there before. And this next slide here are these individual diagnoses or conditions that have to deal with these herbicide or Agent Orange type of things here during those time frames. for those conditions. Some of these may or may not apply due to those locations and those time periods. You know, a lot of these individuals may have been older right now, but it is something that is available to those individuals, as well as these new conditions that weren't previously there before. So this next slide here that we're going to talk about is processing these claims. So it does talk about PACT Act claims, but this is kind of the claim era in general. So the first thing that we're going to touch on is there may be some of you individuals here that are on this call that may have served in the past in a different form of service, different branch. You had a break in service, you previously filed before, and then you have new service now. So one of the biggest things, and the thing that we want to make sure that everybody understands, is that just because an individual was denied in the past doesn't mean it's a continuous forever denial. Individuals who were previously denied in the past, especially before the PACT Act um, was brought up, you can now file a claim under the PACT Act to review something that you were previously denied for in the past that now the PACT Act opens up. So I'll give you a quick example on this. An individual applied for a certain disability in the past. He had that diagnosis, but the examiner found that there was no connection in service. Now, fast forward with the PACT Act granting those either new conditions as presumptives or enabling individuals to claim some type of exposure that they were exposed to during their service, that enables an individual to refile under the PACT Act as new evidence. To submit one of those appeals or refile, you would need to use VA Form 20-0995, and there's commonly referred to as a supplemental claim. One of the most important things with filing these supplemental claims for individuals who were previously denied in the past is that you must provide new and relevant evidence. And some people get that confused with some things that may or may not have any impact on whether or not this new claim will get approved or denied. But new evidence in this example that I just provided you guys, as you know, somebody who applied in the past, got denied. Now we have these new laws, such as the PACT Act, that warrants as new evidence, new and relevant evidence, to refile and reopen a case under the PACT Act for something that you may have now, whether it be a current diagnosis of something you were previously denied or something that opened up this realm of the condition that you have now and the exposure. So I did want to touch on that, as it's extremely important, because some individuals think that because they were previously denied in the past, it was forever a denial, and that's a big misconception that we see very common. So now we're going to go over maybe individuals who have never applied before, and the proper form that you must apply to for a new claim or an initial claim is VA Form 21-526EZ, and it can be searched under Application for Disability and Compensation for Benefits. So this one's very important, is because if you've never filed before, you can only file on this claim. You cannot file on any other claim because it'll get returned to you to file on this claim. And whenever individuals file for new claims, it's very we very much encourage submitting supportive medical evidence along with lay evidence. So I'll give you a couple examples of supportive medical evidence. So let's say you have been getting treatment from a private examiner or a private care outside of the VA. We encourage you to submit that medical evidence to the VA that supports any type of diagnosis that you have or anything like that. Lay evidence would fall under the realm of, let's say you writing a letter just on whether a blank piece of paper or anything like that, describing your condition. So you can, let's say an individual can apply for diabetes, and a lay evidence would be such as you writing information about your diagnosis, about how it impacts your life, your perception on the connection between your service and your condition, and everything that kind of involves how that condition you have now relates to service. And one of the biggest things that can very much impact the decision on any individual's claim is the lack of information or the information that can be provided. And that lay evidence gives the veteran or the service member an opportunity to describe what they have, to describe perhaps a missing puzzle piece of the evidence, and it gives the VA a first-hand look at how this information or how this diagnosis or how this condition relates to your service and how it affects your everyday life. So now a lot of individuals are unsure whether or not they want to apply right now or apply sooner than later or whatever, however they deem to apply. We highly recommend individuals who are uncertain at this time, or if they don't know if they're going to apply within the next couple of months, to submit an intent to file on that form, the 21-0966, the intent to file for compensation or pension or survivor's pension. The biggest and most important thing that this impacts veterans is that this enables you to submit an intent to file, meaning that you are intending to file within a year. If you were to get awarded, there is a potential that you can get up to 1 year's worth of back pay up to that intent to file date. So let's say, I'll give you guys an example. Let's say somebody submits an intent to file in January of 2026. Fast forward all the way to December of 2026, you decide to file your claim. We are within that 1 year of that file expiration date, intent to file expiration date. If you were to get granted, there's a potential that you can get backdated and back paid all the way to the date that you submitted your intent to file. And that has also been proven to serve as a big help for veterans who are just unsure of the process, and they just don't know exactly what they want to do right now or what to claim. And I've never seen it to where this has become some type of disadvantage to anybody when regard to what they are going to claim or want to claim. And there are no downfalls to submitting an intent to file. If you were to submit an intent to file, you have 1 year to submit an application. And if it were to expire, nothing happens. You would just have to refile again with a new effective date or anything like that. There wouldn't be any type of recourse or anything like that. So now on our VA website at va.gov, this does talk a little bit about Albuquerque, but it is available to any veteran anywhere that we have a VERA, VERA link that supports individuals contacting their local regional offices directly to speak with their public contact about any type of questions that you may have about the process of applying for benefits, any type of questions of the status of a claim that you might be in right now or anything like that. You can always file in person at any of your regional offices or online. The Vera sites that is at that link right there, it provides you an opportunity to look up the regional office closest to you and visit that office, or at least schedule an appointment or do walk-ins. They allow that to go and file your application there. Some of the fun facts that I do want to go over just a little bit. Right now on the va.gov website, the average date as of December 2025 to how long it takes for VA to make a decision is about 85 days. Now, keep in mind, there's many variables to applying for disability compensation from the time that you do apply to the time that you make a decision. And I do want to go over that lifestyle or that life cycle of a claim for individuals who do file for compensation. So if it's your first time filing, you would submit an application. Your application will be received by the VA. If it's your first time, the VA will go to your service, whether if it's PHS or the previously served in the Army or whatever the case, they will go to those services and get all of your medical and military documents for you. Sometimes that can take anywhere between 1 month to 6-7 months. It really just depends on the complexity of the information in your file, how long you served, when you served, and things of that nature. Next, once the VA has all of that information, they're going to review your claim based off of what you claimed, the medical documentation if you have to support it, and then review it to schedule you to an examination. An examination under the VBA, or the Veterans Benefits Administration, is commonly referred to as a compensation and pension exam, sometimes can be misunderstood for what it is. And one of the best ways to explain it is that you're not going to these VA CMP exams, compensation and pension exams, to receive like a diagnosis or for treatment. It's really there to determine the severity of this condition and review your diagnosis. That's where this VA examiner or a contract vendor is going to review everything that the VA had at the time that they sent that information to the examiner. So next, once that examination is complete, that exam will come right back to the VA. They're going to review if anything was missing on that exam. They're going to review if anything else needs to be sent back for clarification or anything like that. And if not, they will send the claim to a rating official. The rating official is going to go and look at the claim, the exam. They're going to look at all your military service history, your current medical documents, and then they will make a decision. So in general, from the time you submit a claim to the time you get your rating decision, your notification, it goes in these steps, and you might have referred to some steps online, a step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. There have been times where a case will go to the rating official, and it goes right back to the development team because there was something that was missed, and they want to make sure that they want to get everything in your favor as far as additional medical documentation or just clarification from those exam vendors or those VA examiners. So in the biggest water hose that I can explain here is there's a lot to the VA disability compensation side of things. The most important thing is if you're unsure today or moving forward about when you want to apply or what you want to apply for or whatever the case may be, we encourage to submit your intent to file as soon as possible. To submit and hold your file date so that if you file in the future, you can potentially get back paid to that date. And then 2, the information that we kind of went over here is all available on va.gov, and there's plenty of information on there, such as what you could be eligible for, put some more in things on exposure and locations, and some more resources there on what you could get after you get service connected for some of these things here. So Annette, that is the end of our presentation here, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Thanks, Adam. Jasmine, we can go ahead and open up the chat line. We can probably take some questions. If you guys can stay on the line for just a minute, see if anyone has any questions specific to the VA process. We'll take those and see if we can get some answers today. And then again, anything else, well, we can put that in a document and post it on the COA website.
Okay.
So Eric, you can actually sit down. I think when I retired, I sat down with a benefits advisor with my medical record, and they went through it page by page with me for the filing. Is that a good course of action for people?
Yeah, and the individual who spoke before has kind of touched on it a little bit. There's a couple things to mention with something like that. So the individuals at the public contact offices are often individuals there to just help veterans apply for benefits, and the experience that you're kind of going over would be more so of getting assistance from a VSO. So somebody like the American Legion or your state specific Department of Veteran Service or DAV, the Disabled American Veteran Service, or any type of service VSO service organization. And we do encourage that because those individuals will be able to have access to your claims file, and they'll be able to sit down and review that information, what you can claim, potentially where you've been, and provide you some really good avenues of what you can claim and what may or may not be likely. One big thing that I do want to touch on now that we brought up this topic is the VSO's guidance or the VSO's recommendation isn't always the final determination. And I want to make that clear because there has been instances where individuals seek VSO assistance and the VSO might say, this might not get approved or something to that nature. And it discourages the veteran to apply for any type of benefit or seek that. But we always encourage that if you ever still want to apply after speaking with one of those individuals, we always encourage applying no matter what they do say, because it's very important to have the Maine VA take a look at it and make an official determination.
Okay.
And then I saw one of the questions here about intent to files. I'm kind of going through some of these here, and I'll
Okay.
read
Thank
them
you.
as I see them. So one of the intent to files is for individuals like who are actively serving and their service is going to end soon or end in the next few months. Intent to files are preserved for veteran status. And I'll give you an example. So for if an individual, let's say, is going to complete their service in March, the soonest the VA can pay an individual based off of a grant would be that next following month. So if an individual is on active duty status right now and they submit an intent to file, it doesn't necessarily get backdated to an active duty status because those benefits are reserved for veteran statuses. So that's really more so something that would be effective after any type of active duty consideration service has ended. That's when those intent to file start. And let me see here what else here. So an intent to file expiring. So let's say somebody submits an intent to file in January and they do not submit a claim all the way till December and they want to submit another intent to file. That second intent to file does not refresh the original intent to file that was submitted in January. It's very important to remember that second area, that second intent to file would not technically refresh that first one. Let's see. I'm going through some more of this chats here. So the BDD process, yes. So I was looking at here at this next question here about the BDD processes during the active duty timeframe, no nexus needed, right? So within the first year of individuals filing for benefits under the BDD process, or if you're within six months, 180 days to 90 days of your release of active duty status or anything like that, you have generally 12 months to apply without having a review of a medical nexus. So what will happen is individuals under that BDD program, if you file within 180 days to 90 days of your expected separation date, you'll go to exams. The way the VA looks at it is they won't send those examinations to for medical opinions. You'll just be evaluated for the condition that you have, because as long as you're within that 1 year of service, which you would be if you were in that BDD process, they would look at your service as causing those conditions, not having to seek that medical opinion. So that is correct. So let me keep going through here. So Rachel Lopez, I was looking over your question. How do we access the service to review our medical record and advise accordingly? If you're referring to accessing your medical record, after veteran status or once you become a veteran or of that veteran status. Generally, you wouldn't be able to have access to that record unless you request your C file from the National Archives or from the VA, and that can be a lengthy process. In my experience, when individuals who are getting ready to separate or things like that, they're offered some type of medical CD or medical disc of your medical records right before you separate, or at least that was my experience at the time. But once you do become a veteran, you will have access to any type of VA medical documents or medical information evidence through My Healthy Vet once you do become a veteran. But if you were to request your whole like a claims file as far as or all of your your military service records, that would have to be done through a Privacy Act request, requesting those from the National Archives. So I'm going to continue looking at some of these here. So Stetson Schmidt, prior DoD service treated independently for VA disability. Once an officer later serves in the U.S. PHS, or does the U.S. PHS service change how VA evaluates service connection? So the VA looks at everything as one service unless there is some type of previous service that was dishonorable. That's when a VA, that one kind of gets in the weeds a little bit more so of whether one service is looked at differently other than the fact that, but an example of when two separate periods of service, let's say there was a break in service, you served 10, 20 years ago, and now you're serving under the PHS now, there would be consideration of both periods of service, both types of medical opinions to determine if this disability or whatever could have been caused by either service. So they will look at both services, but it does not change how they evaluate your service and your connection. So Amanda Paris, I think you're referring here to what happens if you cannot produce your record of entrance on duty physical. So I'm assuming like when you first got into the service or first started service, you're referring to your entrance physical. So any time after you served or anything like that, all those medical documentation is submitted into your file and we can access that. If you are referring to more so specifically like the BDD process of getting those medical documentation, it is required to be under that BDD process to submit that medical information. And if you didn't have it or weren't able to produce it at the time, while you're within those eligible BDD timeframes, your claim will just remain active until you separate, and then we will request those documentations for you and then continue it at that time.
Sorry, is there any way that I can get that information? That's what I'm kind of wondering. And I don't know that you would be able to answer for the USPHS folks, but for medical affairs branch, that's who I don't have it. It's not in a military, record of any kind, electronic health record. I don't have that paperwork anymore. Does medical affairs have that? Does anyone know?
I don't know off the top of my head, Amanda. I'm sorry about that on how that one specifically works. I'm sorry.
Yes, medical affairs should have your entry physical.
And I'm still reading through some of these here, so just one second.
So everyone, I know Eric and Adam spent, this is Annette, a lot of time on the PACT stuff. But the whole VA benefits disability rating is for basically anything medical that occurred to you while you were serving. So if you develop sleep apnea, for me personally, I had a lot of joint issues. So those things are all documented in my medical record. So then when I retired, they were able to go back through and see that I had been to sick call multiple times or had different orthopedic injuries, and they were able to give me a rating based on that. So it's not just for the toxic exposures. or anything like that. It's anything medical that related to, you could have plantar fasciitis that developed while you're on active duty. Those are the kinds of things that you should try and get at least a VA physical to get that in your record with the VA. So even if you get a 0% rating, if it's still documented as a condition when you retired, if it flares up down the road, they can change that rating to 10% or 20% or something. But as long as it's in your record. So I just encourage everyone to please do your VA disability, or at least your VA physical when you get out and file, even if it's just the intent to file. I have so many friends who said, "Oh, nothing's wrong with me, I'm fine," and then years down the road, they never filed, and now they're kind of doing a lot of work at the back end of it. So just at least get in the system, get a VA account, get your separation physical and your VA physical, and certainly connect with like a VA benefits advisor is strongly recommended because they know the process better than anyone.
Agreed, Annette, and I appreciate your input on that. And I would be happy to get some of these questions sent over, and we can get these answered with some more clarity and things like that.
Yeah, we're Jasmine and I are copying these down, so we'll kind of get those out to you and give you a few days to maybe answer some of them so we can post those for everyone to see. So
That another thing, I have one of my friends who was a commander in the Air Force, who had sleep apnea. He was a commanding officer. He was also a pilot, and he never went to get his sleep apnea documented because he would have lost his flight status and so forth. So if you have anyone who is similar to that or have not actually went to medical for a condition because they thought it would hurt their career, after they get out, you can also still attempt to have that put in your, have a VA disability claim put in for it. And in his case, he was able to file the disability claim for it. And they asked him certain things that, even though it wasn't in his medical record, he was able to get letters from his wife and children and so forth saying how much he snored and all the other stuff that was related to sleep apnea. And he actually was awarded from the VA that disability. So even if you don't have it in there, if you know that you have some type of issue based upon being in the military, as far as, and you believe that you can, it is a disability, go ahead and file for it anyway. They will tell you in the letter that you'll receive, if they denied you, the reason why they denied you. And when they do that, you can take that information and you can work on that so it can be approved if you have the right documentations or get them the right information concerning it.
yeah, thanks, Adam. Yeah, I think everyone, I see where Commander Bond's asking about whether it's, how can you prove it's service connected? It's essentially if you're on active duty, you're wearing the uniform and you have a medical condition and it's documented in your record, they usually will say it's service connected. If it's a chronic condition, I've had friends who've gotten ratings for hypertension that they developed while they were on active duty. So it's up to the onus is on you to make sure that this stuff is in your record. But once, as Eric and Adam have said, you'll go in and the VA will review it and give you a rating based on the documentation and the severity of whatever's going on with you. So it's not, you don't have to prove that it's service connected. It's basically anything that occurs while you're wearing the uniform that occurred medically. I've never seen anyone not get that in their record. There's never been like an onus on you to prove that it's service connected. I hope that makes sense.
It does.
All right, well, we're almost out of time. We've got all the questions. I think Jasmine and I have been copying these down. And like I said, we'll kind of catalog them and get some answers and get those out to everyone. But look over some slides, log into the website. I would definitely, again, encourage everyone to please get a VA connect with the VA and set up an account. So that you have that. And that's where, if you put in a disability claim, you can always access your account and see what the status is, like where it is in the process. And I would encourage everyone to be very patient, because for me, it took over 6 months for me to get my rating after I retired. So it sounds like Eric said it's maybe it's streamlined a little more now, but it did take a long time. And again, when I got my rating, I challenged it because I didn't think that they had annotated things correctly. So I wrote them a letter to challenge it, and they increased their rating. And then I ended up getting back pay for the time, like for the portion of period that they had given me the lower rating. So I did get all that was resolved, but it does take a long time. And again, just make sure stuff is in your record, that you're documenting it. You've sought medical care if you have issues, and again, work with a benefits advisor to kind of get that stuff taken care of. All right, well, I think that's going to wrap up today's sessions. If you have any additional questions after this, I think everyone has my email, and you please write me directly, and I'll get you the answers that you need. But look over everything. If something pops in your mind that you really want to ask a question, again, just email me directly. And otherwise, Jasmine and I will get these questions out and get answers to them and get those posted. So, all right. Well, Eric and Adam, thank you so much for your time today. It's a lot of information, just like the previous presentation. It's a lot of stuff that it's extremely important that you do understand all this stuff. As you're transitioning out of the uniform. So, okay, Jasmine, if you want to stay on the line with me for a minute, and then everybody else, this concludes the session today. We will be talking next Tuesday. We will have our financial planning brief, and the VA burial eligibility presentation and benefits is next week also.
Thank you very
Okay.
much, Annette.
Thank you.
Oh,
Annette.
yeah. I
Thank
hope
for
you guys have
having
a
us.
great day. Thank you so
You
much.
as well. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.